Do you think you could apply lean startup principles to venture capital, or?
I sure hope so.
I mean, what would that look like?
The biggest thing is this change in accounting that we're talking about. That instead of what we want to do is try to take gut intuition out of the direct decision making.
Just to be clear,
yeah.
so the change in accounting is the change in the way an investor, what metrics an investor looks at to evaluate the progress of a startup.
Exactly right. So what we would want to do is first of all drive the batch size down. So we would want to, instead of making like an investment every 18 months with very large amounts of money, ideally we would make the investments more frequently. This is all speculation. No one has actually successfully done this as far as I know. You'd want to make investments on a continuous basis, more frequently, that were based on more or less automatic criteria. Right now, that sounds crazy because the overhead of making an investment is so high.
Tranching and things, but it's actually, there's all sorts of problems with
it. Yeah,
it's
all kind of, I think it's quite difficult, and I think at the root of the difficulty is we don't currently have any objective data about who's making progress and who's not, and so it's really difficult to devise the metrics for the tranching to make it make sense. And the other thing you'd want to do is,
I think there's also, it raises like psychological issues too. If you have the, it's what we call the IV drip in the business.
Yeah, exactly right. You don't want that.
The fact that the founder is always like, okay, if I don't get my money next month, it's like, I have to be thinking about this. There's sort of this psychological comfort in saying I have 12 months. I can,
Yeah, and I think
focus on the problem.
We have to figure out a way to give people that same psychological sense of comfort, but still have the investors and entrepreneurs together be able to work together on and creating some incentive to be able to pivot sooner. Because what happens right now is for the non-experienced entrepreneurs, the good entrepreneurs manage this really well, but a lot of first-time entrepreneurs especially, when they get 18 months of funding, they then go heads down and crank out code for 15 months, put their head up, and they're like, uh-oh. We launched it and now we only have 3 months and there's not time to pivot and now we're basically screwed. What we want to do is try to get the feedback that the entrepreneur needs to happen much sooner in the process and have that be just a regular part of doing business.
So I feel like some products, like my last company was a security company called Site Advisor, and basically so we basically sat in a room for 12 months, built it with, we had some feedback, but not really, and then released it. And we happened, I think, to do a decent job and seemed to kind of get product market fit. In retrospect, I think we were lucky, and it was not the best process. But at the same time, it's hard with security. Like you can't sort of half protect somebody, right? Like like it's not like you can, it's not like a game where you can sort of leave out a bunch of features. Like if you let 5% of the viruses through, it's probably worse than no security, software at all. And you could argue, maybe people would argue the same thing. It's true of, a cancer drug or something, right? How do you, I mean, would you just say in that case the minimum viable product does take 12 months?
I think it's actually an orthogonal question. I don't have a point of view about it because I don't know the business well enough to know. There's nothing wrong with having a minimum viable product that takes 12 months at all.
So you accept that could be the case. It could take 5 years even. I mean,
but even if you're in that situation, it couldn't hurt to just double check that if the product does what you promise, customers are dying to have it. Yeah. So you could still be doing what they call customer development in parallel with product development.
And there's even if you can't do this, as I recall in your book, like Dropbox created a video describing what the product's supposed to do that hadn't been built. Like Bill Gates used to go sell vaporware to everyone and then build it, right? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I'll give another story from the book from an Austin-based company called Food on the Table. They do this thing we call the concierge minimum viable product, and that is, rather than build any technology at all, you go by hand individually give some customers the royal treatment, the best version of your service delivery you can imagine. In Food on the Table's case, this was a menu planning, meal planning, grocery thing. It would algorithmically figure out what's on sale at your local grocery store, what your family's dietary restrictions are, what your kids like to eat, and figure out optimal recipes for you to cook and give you a shopping list. And it's pretty complicated technology. First customer, they got by hand in their local shopping market, and then they literally would go to that customer's house once a week and collect the check and write down the customer's menus and really do an incredibly good job serving that one customer. And then they got second customer, third customer. Pretty soon, that didn't scale.
How do you do that with so many interesting internet businesses or marketplaces or network effect businesses? Like, how do you do it with those businesses? It's right. I mean, where
absolutely.
Like, if you put one person on eBay, it's not very useful, right? I mean,
you have to do it just like eBay did, which you have to choose a very narrow, specific early adopter.
The bowling pin.
It's totally bowling pin.
Okay.
We're going to go after auctions for Pez dispensers, where it's a small enough segment that we can go find all the people who do this behavior, and we can organize for them all to be in the same place at the same time. It's Facebook at Harvard.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to build the next Facebook, but I have very few entrepreneurs who pitch me the next Facebook have the courage to just launch a product that has nothing more than poke on one campus. I mean, that takes actually like a lot of courage if you're a visionary person. I highly recommend that. I'm sure you've seen this interview with Mark Zuckerberg from 2005. He's just like sitting on a couch and pontificating about Facebook. And what's so cool about it is that's what vision really looks like. He doesn't quite understand what Facebook's going to become. He's not making bold, grandiose predictions about what's doing 5 years, but he is laser focused on right now, what the product's doing right now, how can I make it better for my customers? Yeah. And he's the only person I've ever seen be honest about the fact that when your product goes more mainstream as it scales, you should feel some pain about that. You're actually giving up on some things for your early adopters. In the interview, he's very clear. Facebook is getting worse, right? When it was only at Harvard, it had all these like Harvard-specific features and course catalogs and all this extra stuff that they could do at Harvard they can't do for all campuses. And he's kind of feeling that twinge of pain about it because his early adopters are feeling that too. And that's an inevitable part of going mainstream. And that's the crossing the chasm, thesis that you always have to give something up when you make that cross. But to me, that's what a visionary CEO really looks like.